To close out this section, let's talk about why monopolies are bad from a second perspective, which is using our criteria for the first and second welfare theorem. Okay? So remember, we are looking for three criteria: input efficiency, output efficiency, and exchange efficiency. So, if we throw a monopoly into the mix, and then one of these is going to break down and no longer hold. So let's try to figure out which one. So remember, input efficiency is that the marginal rate of technical substitution is equal across firms. That's a basic condition. It holds. Markets make this hold because they set MRTS equal to, if it's labor and capital, something like the wage rate over the capital rental rate. Okay? And that comes from cost minimization. Okay, so if I have an isoquant over capital and labor, like so, if I'm trying to minimize my cost to produce some Q value, like say I'm making 10 units, I'll do that by finding the iso cost curve, which has slope negative W over R, and finding the point. I want to find the iso cost curve that is as close to 0 as possible, but is still at least intersecting somewhere with this isoquant of Q equal 10. Okay? So basically, I do that by finding this tangency point, and this tangency point ensures that the marginal rate of technical substitution equals negative W over R. Okay? And the main point is that monopolists do this too. Okay? Monopolists also minimize cost. They want to use their resources efficiently. They want to produce Q for as cheaply as possible, which means that input efficiency will actually continue to hold even if we throw monopolies in there. What about exchange efficiency? Exchange efficiency is that the marginal rate of substitution across different people is also equal. And this also holds pretty trivially because it's set in the market by setting MRS equal to a price ratio, and everyone faces the same prices. One of these prices could be a monopoly price, but people still optimize correctly. They don't treat it differently because it's a monopoly price. It's still how much you have to pay to get the good. And so when they maximize utility, they take that into account, and they set their marginal rate of substitution equal to the price ratio. Everyone does that, and so you get everyone's MRSs equalized to each other. Last one, we have the output efficiency. Remember, this requires that the marginal rate of transformation equals the marginal rate of substitution, and we're going to see that this is the one that breaks when you have a monopolist. So why does it break? Well, remember that the marginal rate of substitution, let's do this here, is equal to, for example, the price ratio P1 over P2. Okay? Marginal rate of transformation is the slope of the production possibilities frontier. Okay? So let's draw one of those real quick. Suppose we've got, let's do our examples, food and shelter. Okay, so here's shelter, food, the two goods this economy is producing, and we're going to change these to F and S. Okay? All right. Let's draw a nice curve. So this is the economy's production possibilities frontier. If we give up a little bit of shelter, how much food do we get in exchange if we're using our resources efficiently? Well, the slope of this MRT tells us that, okay? And the slope is equal to, one way to think about the slope is using a cost function, okay? So if we give up a little bit of, if we give up some S, we gain the marginal cost to produce S, okay? So this is going to be if we give up 1 unit of S. We're going to get the marginal cost to produce it back. That's how much money we have to play with, okay? That allows us to buy some food. The cost of food, 1 unit, the cost of 1 food is MCF. So if we give up a little bit of shelter, we're going to gain MCS. And how much food is that going to let us buy? Well, we divide MCS by MCF. Okay? All right. So there you go. Now, if I'm also going to have an isoquant, a consumer and indifference curve, and I draw the same kind of axes, F over S, they've got some kind of indifference curve. Let's say this gives them utility 10, and they're going to set their utility equal to maximize utility. They're going to basically find the highest indifference curve that is tangent to this budget, and this thing is going to have a slope negative PS over PF. Okay? So the problem is that under monopoly, if one of these firms is a monopolist, say MCS is, then this is not equal to price, it's equal to the marginal revenue of shelter. And let's suppose that food production still is perfectly competitive. So MCF is set equal to the price, but MCS is set equal to the marginal revenue of S, which is less than the price. That means if we divide these two by each other, we're going to get something that is less than PS over PF. Okay? And that is equal to MRS. Okay? So the problem, this is my little proof basically, that when you have a monopoly, we now have MRT no longer equal to MRS. Okay? And that's because the MRT, the slope of the PPF, is no longer going to be equal to the price. If I want to draw basically what's happening, it looks something like this. Here's our PPF, food and shelter. Here's the price. Let's say we're producing at this point. If we're going to have the slope be less than the price ratio, that means that we need, I think basically it looks something like this. Okay? So you can see basically now the PPF and the slope of the prices are no longer tangent to each other. But consumers still take these prices as given, and so the slope of their indifference curve looks something like this. Okay, so this is utility equals 10. That's an indifference curve. And this is a PPF. And essentially you can see that there's this area over here where there's potential gain. Okay, the economy could produce more, could give up a little bit of food, produce a little bit more shelter, and it would make this person better off. They could get all the way out to a higher utility over here, and it would be kind of win-win-win. Okay, so you can see that basically because we've got a monopolist, we're producing less shelter than is optimal and too much food because we're still fully using our resources in this example. And so this is just one example of how basically even in a more in keeping with the spirit of the rest of the course, you can see this is why market power ruins basically the first and second welfare theorem. It balls up the exchange efficiency and tilts the allocation of the economy's resources away from goods that have market power. So we should be making more shelter if shelter's a monopoly, but we're not because they're basically artificially reducing the supply to drive up the price.